Hi guys. This last session is where I want to show you and walk you through my experiences of the properties that I've owned. So, like I've said, I've owned 6. I don't own them all anymore. 2 of them were in the UK and 4 of them in South Africa. So let me take you back. And I hope that, by knowing what I've done, you know what kind of questions you'd want to ask me. Very up close and personal. In 2003 was the first time I owned a property, and it actually just came across me. I was living in London at the time, and life just was working out quite well for me then. And my brother-in-law was selling his flat in South Africa because he was moving into a different property. And my sister just jokingly said, "Do you want to buy it?" And 2003 was a very long time ago now, but it was a time when the property was quite cheap in South Africa. So I bought the property from him for 180,000 Rand. It was a 1-bedroom property in the Berea flat. And I actually was able to put down quite a large deposit, and I had a tenant in immediately. It was quite easy to get a tenant. So that was a good return on investment almost immediately. Now, the thing is, obviously when I was living in London, I was earning pounds, and the exchange rate obviously is in my favor. But that was a kind of scenario which is not usual in South Africa, whereby the bond was almost the same amount as the rental income. Now in the UK, you can often get rental income the same as the bond quite quickly, but in South Africa, it's less quick. So I was able to cover the costs quite early on in that investment. But like I say, they just said, "Do you want to buy it?" And I said, "Yeah," like jokingly, and then I actually did. So that was awesome. That got me onto the property ladder. Then in 2007, I bought a property off plan in Jeffreys Bay, and I ended up, because there was a bit of an issue with it, was off plan. I'd never been to Jeffreys Bay before, but I heard it was very nice there, and there were a number of other people buying it at the same time, also off plan with me. So we all bought one. And then a year and a half went by and nothing got developed and everything like that. So we got a lawyer involved, and there was a legal clause that said if it wasn't made in a certain amount of time, then you could pull out. The deal wasn't binding. So we found that loophole and we pulled out. Ironically, the market boomed, and the market went through a whole big bubble in 2007. And actually, after I had given it back, it was worth about 100,000 more than what I had bought it for. But that was just spilt milk. I mean, this sort of thing happens all the time. The third property that I bought was in London too. So what happened was, and this is quite a fun one, I wasn't the ideal scenario to buy a property with someone. Now, I was a teacher, so I had full-time employment, which is what I'm wanting everyone on this course to also have. I want everyone to be on full-time paid salary. And my friend, and I was a British citizen, which meant that I could get a mortgage much easier than anyone else could. And my friend was a South African citizen, but he also had a British citizenship, and but he was self-employed. So it's harder to get a bond or a mortgage when you're self-employed. You have to show many, many, many more statements. You've got to go many more months back. So what happened was, he said, "Do I want to go into getting this property with him?" And we were in Nando's one day, and it was lots of fun, and there was music in the background, and we were jokingly saying, "Yo, why not? Let's just go into a property together." Now, I would never suggest that anyone would ever do something like this, but that's what we did. And immediately in my mind, I had a figure of we knew we wanted to buy a property, and we had looked at some online, not actually physically any, and immediately I had a figure in my mind of what the asking price was and what we should offer instead. So the number came up, and we made an offer. Like I don't even think we saw another property. which again, I wouldn't say is the best scenario, but that's what happened. And so the offer was accepted. Now, the actual deal was difficult, and I'll explain why. He, the person who I was going in with, went in with me because he needed me. He was self-employed, like I said, and I wasn't. However, he was worried that I, as a single mom, wasn't going to make the payments monthly. So it was quite tricky, and we were going to go 50-50. And what was going to happen was he was going to move into the flat. It was a 2-bedroom flat in Kew, which is quite a nice area in London. And they were going to rent out the other room. So 50-50 was what I wanted in the beginning. And then he was like, let's go rather 60-40. So I was like, okay. 60-40 because I seemed like the riskier party. On paper, I seemed like the better. In real life, I seemed like the more risky partner. So we actually didn't agree on 60-40 either. In the end of it, and this is where I'm trying to say it was hard to relinquish control because it was my first property I was ever going to own in England, and I was getting excited and I really liked the actual property. We ended up with the deal being 30-70. 70 him owning and 30% me owning. This also meant that 30% I would pay for all utilities, and he would pay 70% for all utilities, expenses, and everything. But what was interesting was this, relinquishing that control and not having that 50% partnership gave him an immediately psychological turnaround. He was far more invested, he was far more willing to take control, and I almost became like a silent partner. So everything I still had to pay 30% of. But we had another agreement, which also, I usually wouldn't do it, but it felt right giving up this control too. And that was that whatever the rental income was, didn't matter to me. As long as my part was paid off by the person who was renting the second room. In other words, he could have, say the rent was £1,000, say he charged the other person £1,000, he would have been living there with his girlfriend in the other room for free. And I had no control over that. But I realized I didn't actually need control over that. Whether the other person was going to be in the other room or not, it didn't really make a difference to me. My mortgage, my part of the mortgage was paid off. But I learned that this was a win-win situation for quite a long time. But if you remember then, a little bit later, a year or two later, there was the recession. And it hit America very hard, and it hit London hard. And what this meant was the house bubble burst. So what had happened was, in the February, him and I had decided that we would, that if any time after 2 years, one of us could buy the other out as long as it was agreed on a certain price. And what happened was we agreed in an email that he would buy my percentage out, my share out, and that he would keep, well, basically, that's what would happen. He'd buy my share out, and at the agreed market rate in the February. Now, I made then life decisions based on this. But he asked if we could not do it in that February, right away. Could we wait until the July? So I said, okay, we can. It's not a problem, but I want to make it that it's at this price, what it's currently valued at today, because I'd like to do the deal today. If you're wanting to do it in July, then let's just confirm. And we confirmed on email that would be the price that I would get. So say it was, let's just give a silly figure. Let's just say the flat was 200,000. I was going to get 60,000 in July on the 1st of July, because I was going to get 60,000 in the February. Only what happened was there was the big recession. So come July, even though we had it in email, and in email it's a binding agreement in generally, in like Scotland and a lot of countries, it's not a binding agreement in England. So I battled to fight things, and not fight things badly. I battle to fight something because it actually makes me physically ill. I felt he was completely in the wrong. I didn't get lawyers involved. In fact, what I ended up doing, another friend of mine said that they would buy out my share, but this person who I'd bought it with said no, because that means that he would have to negotiate with somebody else. So it was quite tricky. A lot of people tried to come and help me, and it ended up just being that I said, whatever lawyer you have, we'll use your lawyer, and they can draw up the agreement, and we will just and you can just buy out my share, because I got so sick with it. I got like ulcers in my mouth, and it wasn't worth the stress. Essentially, I should have earned a lot more out of that property deal than I did, but I learned lessons, and the main lesson being that everything needs to be in writing, and emails not, although it is considered legal, you should always prepare for the worst scenario. You got to be careful. I'm not saying it was bad to go into covenant with him. I'm just saying you got to be careful who you pair up with when you're buying property, and you've got to make sure that your aims and your vision for the property is the same. So ours was, and it was a win-win for quite a while. And we had an escape clause. In other words, we said after X many months or X many years, we will then give the other person the option of selling and buying. So essentially it was good, but in the end it ended badly. And for that reason, I would be very careful on who I went into a property with in the future. Then I sold that property. And then there was another property in England, which you could only buy if you were a key worker. And what this meant is, if you were a nurse, a teacher, an occupational therapist, a police person, a fireman, any of those kind of jobs, because the government basically pays them, and you earn less than the private sectors, the government wanted to allow you to get onto the property ladder and live in a place that you could not normally afford. However, there were some criteria being you had to be a key worker, and you weren't allowed to own another property in England, which was good because now I didn't. It also meant that I don't really know if you weren't allowed to own another property in the world, but I think it did. So then that meant that I had to sell my property in South Africa, which was giving me passive income coming in. I was getting money from it. But I really wanted to own my own property in England at that stage. So what I did was I sold my property in South Africa to a family member at what I think is a win-win scenario, because once they had bought it, they also got income that was bigger than the bond straight away. And then I knew that I was being more legit in the whole process of buying in England. And what this meant in England was, with these houses, basically they're called housing associations. They're very clever. They are like new complexes are developed, and a third of them are private, a third of them are for what we call key workers, which is what I was. I was a psychology teacher. And a third of them were for like council housing for people who didn't have jobs and the government provided for. So it was kind of amalgamating a whole lot of different cultures, which I thought was a good thing. And I bought that property, and that property has been awesome. So that was an amazing investment, and I really wish that you can also, if you own a percentage of it, you could step your way up. So if you want to own more of it, you can pay off the housing association kind of thing. Then I decided to move to South Africa for many reasons of my own. It seemed like the move that everyone was going the opposite way. And I moved back to South Africa, and I stayed in a 2-bedroom tiny little garden flat in the bottom of someone's garden. And I saved up money to buy property, and I bought what is my strategy, which is basically a minimum of 2-bedroom in a complex in a place that I wouldn't mind living, close to good schools, that I felt was safe. So I knew the complex that I liked, but there were no properties available. So I just wrote in everyone's post box there, and I just put a letter and said, if you're going to sell, please can you contact me. Anyway, ended up being that the one lady, because everyone knows everyone, who knows everyone, who knows everyone, one lady knew family member, and she told me that there wasn't a place going. So I approached the seller directly. So that sale was without any estate agent involved. Now we can discuss other times when this is a pro and when this is a con. Obviously a pro, when there's not estate agents involved, is that you would pay less because you both meet halfway. You don't have to pay the estate agent who the seller normally pays. But the con is that the process can be quite tricky, especially when neither party knows the exact processes and things involved and who should essentially be in control of the whole process. But anyway, I believe that I made money as I bought that property. In other words, I got it at a lower price than what it was worth, and I got tenants in straight away. So I got the tenants in so that they could pay off that bond, and I lived in a smaller property because I didn't need a bigger property at that stage in my life. So what I'm trying to say is that even though we're all here to make money through property, sometimes we have to make sacrifices, and we don't have to live in the most expensive means in order for us to have a future goal of paying something off quicker. The last property is the one that I currently have as my own home, and this is my ideal property. It's exactly next to a school, which is what I wanted for my son. It's in a complex, it's safe, and so I've basically followed a very different pattern, but I've bought off a new build, I've bought off a share, a government share, I've bought privately, I've bought through an estate agent twice. So I just want to say that those are my experiences, and that's where I can help you. So if you are buying in any of these sort of scenarios, that's where my experience lies. And so I just hope that I can help you on your experience, on your journey, because actually it's the journey that's the exciting part. I mean, owning a house is wonderful when you actually get to live in it. That's your home. It's a very different decision to owning a property that you are wanting to make money off. It's emotional. You have to factor in all the things that you really want. But my aim in this all is to just make this not so overwhelming for you. And because property has given me the most passive income, and I've had the best return on investment, I'm here to help you through that journey. And I'm planning on buying another property soon, and I want to walk through the journey with you so that you can learn through me as well. Okay, good luck.